projects, we're look at quite a few projects outside of the RFP, especially potentially long lead or emerging technologies. We don't have obviously unlimited bandwidth, but we are, for example, this winter we'll be working with Pacific Northwest National Labs on helping them do some economic analysis on compressed air energy storage. So we do those types of things outside, and we'll be continuing to look at pumped hydro, those types of solutions. So if you're interested in talking more, be in touch.
Cool. Well, and I was going to, when Patrick's comments about sort of doing a bunch of the business case work, I think it's sort of the mirrored side to my comments about helping out with the RFP. And and this isn't utility specific stuff. This is more sort of big organizations and people with lots on their plate. But I mean, if you come in with a business case, you know, like Patrick mentioned, then there's a framework, which you may not agree with it, but you've taken the first cut of the framework for the discussion. And the odds of that discussion staying within that framework and what's being evaluated are much higher than if Patrick, one, had to find the time to go look at a blank whiteboard and start to map out how he would analyze it, which might not be in your favor relative to other solutions. And so I think as one of the advantages is a small company with focus has, or a mid-sized company too, is to pick up and carry some of that water, so it makes it easier for a big company to sort of look at it and say, okay, yeah, I see. Let me start to get my head around it. We can argue about the assumptions, but you might get away with getting the framework as you like it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
With the advent of more smart grid technology and more of the interconnections to vendors and so forth, what role is cybersecurity playing in what you put together for your proposals?
So, there's certainly a concern as you're putting things in, putting connections, maybe smart meters and home area networks that are in people's houses, connecting back to the utility. We tend to see that our large investor-owned, or maybe any of the utilities, would like to separate those, keep the software systems separate as long as possible. I think it's kind of inevitable that it'll all come under zip-type requirements, but for now we're seeing large customers like Duke Energy keeping the systems that we're building that will communicate eventually with smart grid technology in homes as separate with firewalls between them from the transmission grid management system. We work with Idaho National Labs and others, companies that also look for testing our systems. So there's IT departments again are certainly interested in seeing you have some kind of credentials, what kind of testing your systems have gone through to see how easy they are to break them or not. So there's certainly an emphasis and a concern, but right now I think that the main level I see is to try to keep it separate from what Eric is saying are certain assets.
So I mean, before the next question, I mean, in my experience, I mean, certainly a lot of the trials that we did were more standalone, and there wasn't that much concern about it. We got involved in some bigger projects where definitely there was focus on security. As a software guy, I would argue it was more. There's interesting learning that's going to have to go around what is really secure, and just because you put in a hard line, a dedicated serial line or something like that to it, as opposed to using encryption, the perception is sort of if I have it physically secure, it is secure, and anybody that's spent any time sort of hacking around and stuff knows that a bunch of those things can be cracked, and that they're probably you'd probably much rather have sort of really robust encryption securing your traffic, so that even if it's out in the open, if get to it. And then whether it's on the internet or on dedicated lines or whatnot, it's less of an issue. But I'd say that those are, I think the utility industry in general is probably not at the forefront of that in terms of some of the systems that are securing power plants and things like that. Right now it's mostly by sort of physical isolation, which is going to be interesting as we continue to look at interconnecting all these systems as well as them being targets and things like that as well. So it's an interesting space that I think there's a lot of work done in and also needs to be done.
This question is also from when you were at Vita Green, it was pretty standard. So you walked into utilities all over the country, and you were pitching an idea that there weren't any standards in 08, 07.
Yep.
So can you just walk me through that part of the dialogue? Because that maybe some others, like myself, have that going on now.
So in terms of when there wasn't sort of an established framework to be having a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to some degree, I mean, that's where that's what creates a great opportunity to go do a pilot, but it also means that you need to probably figure out, because if it's early and they're trying to get their head around sort of how should I be thinking about this, there's a great framework and a platform to be able to start crafting and thinking, and to probably generate small dollars in terms of revenue. But the trick is in parallel to that, you need to figure out, what standards organizations, and it's the great thing about standards is there's so many of them, which group and which even subgroup and whatnot is really going to be driving that, and that's another area that I didn't touch on, but it can be both expensive from a resource standpoint to participate in standards, but it can be really valuable because, and there's a common theme to several of my comments here. Standards are sort of the same way. Whoever's willing to show up and carry the water has an unusual amount of influence. So as a small company, if you show up and you're willing to do hard work, you can have influence far greater than the size of your company. And so you got to pick the right organization because there sometimes may be many, and hopefully sort of garner the influence in that direction. So, and then part of it is, and then you can't control everything, and so it's being prepared to sort of pivot as either new ideas, new concepts, or new things come into the marketplace.
Thank you. There was a question.
Yes, this is for Puget Sound Energy. What's the focus of the new technologies that you might be looking at? What are your priority areas for in terms of just generally selling to utilities?
That's a great question. I would say most of my work has been focused on electric vehicles right now. That's a big part of our influence. That's where a lot of action is happening. And as a utility, we need to be ready for that and also trying to forecast what the future benefits and risks are. So that electric vehicles is a big part. We spent a lot of time looking at solar. I'm personally not as optimistic about the solar space in the next couple years, although prices are coming down dramatically, but they're also coming down when market prices are coming down. And natural gas, like it or not, has been probably the biggest energy revolution in the last decade. And I would say this is something I'm doing a lot more work on and need to do more research on, but fuel cells got a ton of hype back in the turn of the century, if you will. And I think there's actually some promise there. There seems to be some interesting things happening. But it's too early to say from my perspective.
How about bioenergy?
Oh, and energy storage as well. There is a lot happening with energy storage. I'll come back to bioenergy. About the pumped hydro, large scale, potentially some smaller scale. A lot of developments happening in just emerging energy storage technologies. So we'll see. Although one of them just went bankrupt yesterday, Beacon Power. So yeah, Flywheel energy storage. Second DOE loan grant recipient to go down. So that's unfortunate. But bioenergy, in the last request for proposals that PSC did, we received about 10 proposals for biomass. I don't know if you're talking about straight biomass plants, but burning wood chips. We received about 10 proposals. There was a